welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo. Joan Musie's not with us tonight. She'll be back soon. And our guest is the distinguished Carl Dix. And Carl, I don't know exactly how to, organizationally, how to represent you. So why don't you tell us how you want? I should have asked you before, but you can do it more clearly tonight.
I'm a representative of the Revolutionary Communist Party, and I'm a longtime revolutionary activist from back in the anti-Vietnam War days. I refused to go to Vietnam while in the military. Did a couple years at Leavenworth Military Penitentiary for that, and came out a revolutionary and been on that tip ever since.
Right. You know, we've had a number of members of Iraq Veterans Against the War on the show, and it's always such a, to actually talk to people who for whatever reason, and sometimes out of patriotic fervor when they first started out, but they went over there and they came back, and now they have a profound anti-war perspective, and we've had numerous people come on the show with that. So do you find that you came to your politics in the military, or before you were in the military, or afterwards?
The process began before I was in the military, because, you know, it was the 1960s, and like dogs being sicked on people trying to get the right to vote, you know, civil rights workers being murdered, all of that was going on, anti-war protests. And I wasn't in the midst of that, but I was watching it. And then I get drafted, and it brings some things right up to you. You know, got my attention.
Get your attention that way, right? Okay, wow. So you did not actually go to Vietnam?
No, I didn't go to Vietnam. I went into the military. They sent me to Germany, and I was like, phew, I dodged it. But it was only on-the-job training to get me ready to send me over to Vietnam. And I happened to come home on leave with the orders for Vietnam the weekend that Fred Hampton was murdered in his bed by the Chicago police. And I read the story on it, and I realized that was a search and destroy mission. The way that the troops in Vietnam were going after Vietnamese revolutionaries. And I was like, I cannot go off and carry out those kind of missions for the same government that's carrying out those kind of missions against black activists here in the United States. So I ended up refusing to go to Vietnam, doing a couple years in Leavenworth. And there is where I became a revolutionary. It was in Leavenworth. Came out and got hooked up. Was a founding member of the Revolutionary Communist Party.
Right, and we'll talk more about that because I want to actually get to the actual reason why you're here tonight, because you're going to be speaking this weekend, right?
Yes, I'm going to be speaking this Saturday, February 18th at 4 o'clock at the Riverside Church. And my theme is going to be mass incarceration plus silence equals genocide. And I very consciously chose that theme and that topic because let's start with the beginning of it. Mass incarceration is a very serious situation that's facing this society. Almost 2.5 million people in jail, 3/4 of them black or Latino. And the way the authorities run this to us, well, that's the result.
You know, my mind clouds over when you say numbers like that. How many millions of people?
Almost 2.5 million, 2.4 million.
That's as big as Manhattan. That's as big as the Bronx or Queens.
Yeah. That's what you got. And here's another way to look at it. 1971, there were less than 300,000 people in prison.
And that was the time of all these things you were talking about happening. So.
So the numbers have leaped 8 times. That's what we're talking about. And there's a very real correlation between what I was just talking about was going on in the 1960s and that leap in incarceration. Because Richard Nixon was quoted by a cabinet member of his as saying in a cabinet meeting, the problem is the blacks, and we have to devise a solution that doesn't acknowledge that that's what we're dealing with. So they came up with wars on drugs, wars on crime, that were exclusively just about to be waged in the ghettos and barrios across the country.
I know, I'm familiar with a statistic that shows that even in the African-American population, drug use has never been as high a percentage even as in the white population.
Yeah, I mean, look at it.
Black young people do not use drugs more than white people.
Oh, definitely not. The government figures will tell you that between 80 and 85%, it's been pretty steady, of the users of banned drugs in the U.S. are white. But then when you look at who ends up in prison for it, it flips the other way. And what that comes down to is they saw what happened in the 1960s and they remembered, oh, who was it that started that stuff out? It was black people with the civil rights movement. And they also recognized that the conditions they're enforcing in the inner cities today are, if anything, worse than back in the 1960s, because at least then there were factory jobs and stuff that people could get. All of that has been swept up, not only taken out of the inner cities, but taken mostly out of the country. That's now in Mexico, Vietnam, Thailand, somewhere where they can pay people much less and work them in much worse conditions.
As we learned about Apple computers
just
exactly. The other day.
So you got a situation where youth are growing up in these inner cities with no hope for the future, no way to get a job and raise a family. The education system is geared to fail them. So the approach that's being taken is criminalizing these youth, unleashing the criminal injustice system on them, trapping them up in prison, using racial profiling. In New York, they give it an official name, stop and frisk. So you get these youth who are in and out of prison. That becomes a rite of passage in their life. And then once you're in prison, when you get out, even after you serve the sentence, you still are caught up in it. Because you go to get a job, you got to check that box. Have you ever been in prison? You check it, your application likely goes to the garbage can. You refuse to check it, they find out that you were in prison, you get fired. You go to get a government loan.
You lied on your documents.
Yeah, you go to get a government loan to go to school, they find out you've been in prison, you're denied. You can't get public housing. They won't even let you vote. So that's what we're dealing with. And I also very consciously use the term genocide, because I know a lot of people are going to say, well, wait a minute. It is a big problem, all the people who are in prison and the fact that large numbers of them are black or Latino. But genocide, come on now.
Right, it's a strong word.
I consciously chose.
Peoples,
well, see, here's the thing. Genocide, most people will think Nazi Germany, and the fact that millions of Jewish people, almost the whole of the Romani or Gypsy population, homosexuals, other peoples were targeted for extermination by the Nazis.
Children for that kind of behavior. Absolutely.
That's what it. But see, that's what it ended up as. What people don't know about that period is where did it start, and where it started with was stigmatization, blaming Jewish people for the defeat of Germany in World War I, saying, well, the Jews stabbed us in the back. They stigmatized them.
Interesting, because as a street reporter for many years, WBAI and other outlets, I remember the former commissioner of the New York City Police Department, I forget which one, 3 or 4 commissioners back, at a press conference with other reporters present, saying that the reason black people were arrested more and were stopped more and were examined more was because they did more of the crime. He just said it like that. And I think a lot of people believe that.
Yeah, well, see, that's how it's justified. But I wanted to make that analogy to where did it start in Nazi Germany? It started with the stigmatization.
Well, that's my point.
And then the isolation, and it built up to the death camps.
To say that about a whole people, to say you are most of the people in prison because we arrest mostly your people, and then to claim that that is the rationale for why you're going after the people in the first place.
Yeah, but see, and I'm going to get into this when I give my talk on Saturday, when you walk through that ain't what's happening. Not only on the drug tip in relation to who actually uses the drugs, but they literally pass laws which target black and Latino people. There's a 100-to-1 disparity got passed in the 1980s, crack and powder cocaine. They literally passed a law that said you got the same minimum sentence for 5 grams of crack cocaine, which was an inexpensive high, which meant it was prevalent in the poor areas in the inner cities. 5 grams of crack cocaine gets you the same penalty.
That?
I'm going to come to that. 500 grams of powder cocaine. Powder cocaine is more expensive, more well-off people, more suburban, more white people use that. So that's the disparity. And when they passed that, what was their explanation and the justification? Because I read the congressional record. I wanted to see what they said. This guy came in and said, I'm an expert on this. I've studied it. and crack cocaine is a much worse high, which makes it more dangerous. And that was it. Plus, he brings in two people who are addicted to crack, who said, yeah, he's right. Crack is the worst addiction you could have. That's it. They didn't even ask them, have you ever been addicted to anything else?
Right. No, I think tobacco actually is the worst.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing.
I think any doctor would tell you that.
The point was that was just a fig leaf to do this, which would end up
obviously
targeting people in the inner cities for much larger sentences, and it's had that effect.
Right, because the reason I'm saying, because I know we're heading towards the stop and frisk in here in New York, and you know, I was a stickler for the Fourth and Fifth Amendment and the fact that they find nonsensical reasons to search people on the street, find small amounts of marijuana on them to justify the initial search in the first place, and to arrest them and take them off the street to the tune of 500,000 people a year, is one of the most egregious things that I've seen as far as civil liberties in America in many years.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about that, but let's talk about this disparity, because it was 100 to 1.
Okay.
And then Obama comes into office, and he's going to do something about that. Well, what they've done is they've reduced it from 100 to 1 to 16 to 1.
Okay.
So in other words, they stuck the knife.
Oh, in other words, it's still
16 to 1.
Instead of 100 to 1.
Instead of now 5 grams gets you the same of crack gets you the same penalty.
These documents. Why?
As 80 grams.
Yeah.
It is just straight up and down a political compromise. Right. There is no argument made as to why this should continue. The original argument, like if I came to you and said, well, I have a crack addict here, and he is my proof of why you should do this, I'd get laughed out. You know, because that's not, there's no substance to that. The point was they wanted to do that, and they needed a justification. Now they don't even bother to justify keeping the 16 to 1.
That gets back to my.
That's just as far as they would bring it down.
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
So it's all about social control from the beginning.
Control and who you want to control.
Right.
And setting up the laws and the law enforcement to have it work out that way. Because like you're saying, and actually the numbers on stop and frisk is 684,000 plus for last
more than
year.
500,000.
Yeah, a good bit more than 500,000. More than 1,900 people each and every day. 5 out of 6 black or Latino. 90%, they can't even write them a ticket.
I saw that number, 90%. That's
for littering or anything like that.
Yeah,
and see, some of the people that they do write up or arrest were doing nothing wrong. Because when we started, Cornel West and I initiated a campaign of civil disobedience to stop and frisk. And when we did it, we did an action in Harlem, one in Brownsville, one in Queens. Sure. In Queens, they held us overnight, so we were in jail with some other people. And there was a brother there who was in jail because he got stopped under stop and frisk. They didn't find any contraband, no illegal drugs, no weapons, nothing like that. But he didn't have his license with him. He had a driver's license. He didn't have it with him. So they arrested him. Took him to Queens Central Booking, held him overnight. He didn't get to see the judge till the next morning. Now, where is the law that says you have violated something if you don't have your ID on you? But the cops saw nothing wrong with running him in because he was without an ID. And the marijuana thing is even worse.
Because we're getting into the territory of Ramarley Graham.
Yeah. Well, see, the marijuana thing, it is not illegal to have a small amount of marijuana on your person in New York State, as long as it's under 25 grams and in your pocket. But what the cops will do, they'll step to you and say, I want to see what's in your pocket, you know, and they have that right under stop and frisk. You tell them, I'm not going to let you see it, then they run you in because they're cops, and they can do that. If you reach in your pocket and take out that legal amount of marijuana, then they say, oh, you displayed it in public, you're going to jail. And that's why over 90% of the people who are in jail for marijuana charges in New York City are black or Latino, even though that's not reflective of who uses marijuana. No. It's reflective of the way the cops have criminalized having a legal amount if you happen to be black or Latino and happened to get stopped by some cop.
Or a criminal. All right.
That's all that comes down to.
This is Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo. My guest, Carl Dix, a revolutionary and associate of the Revolutionary Worker newspaper, or the Revolution newspaper.
Revolution newspaper.
Sorry about that. And tell us a little bit, because we have, well, that's a good segue to what's behind us right now, Revolution. What is, show us the newspaper.
This is the latest issue of the newspaper.
Right.
And right here behind us is the masthead for the paper.
Right.
So that's what it looks like on the paper every week. And this week we had an article on the vicious police attack on Occupy Oakland. But you mentioned the murder of Ramarley Graham.
Yes.
Brother Ramarley Graham. Look, and I got to call it murder because here's a young man who goes home.
I call it too.
He goes to his house, and I watched the surveillance video outside his house. He actually just walks into his house.
I saw that.
I'm not even sure he knew the cops were after him because he didn't seem to be in any hurry. He just goes in the house. These cops run up. They try to break down the front door. They can't. They go around the back, break in through the back, go in the young man's house. He's up at the bathroom. They run up the stairs, and the cop shoots him. And then they leak, because you know the stuff that ended up in the paper came from the cops.
Sure.
That they found marijuana in the toilet. Okay, I have no idea whether they did or not. I have no idea whether they put it there or not. But even if they did, so what?
I know, it's pretty...
what was their justification for running up in the house? Yeah. Even if they thought he had marijuana, you go get a warrant. You don't break into somebody's house because you think they might have some weed.
I think you're totally right about that.
You know, but they break in, they kill this young man. But then it gets even worse because his grandmother was there and saw this. They take her into custody, take her down to the station, and hold her for hours, grilling her, trying to get her to make a statement, which was a naked attempt to get her to say that what they did was okay. Now, this woman just saw her grandson gunned down before her eyes.
Yes.
The people who did it take her into custody, take her down to the station. Friends come down to the station and try to get to talk with her, and they say, no, you can't talk to her. A lawyer comes down, and at first they wouldn't let the lawyer talk to her because they said she has to ask for you. You know, now, what is this?
They're trying to
compromise
any testimony she has in the future.
Yeah. So, see, this is what
we don't know what you're doing.
This is what we're dealing with, and this is what I'm going to be talking about on Saturday. I'm going to talk about how serious a situation we're up against and the fact that the stigmatization has already gone on. You can see that. You can see that whenever Newt Gingrich gets up there and opens his mouth and talks about, well, the problem is these black youth, they grow up in a dysfunctional culture that doesn't value work. So we should fire the school janitors and make the kids clean up the school. That'll deal with it. Or Rick Santorum says, well, I'm not going to take other people's money and give it to black people. Like that's the problem. No, I think the problem is that capitalism has been extorting money out of all kinds of people all across the country and around the world. That's the actual problem. And then you get Barack Obama with his Father's Day talks where he says the problem with black youth is that black fathers are absent, not dealing with the fact that, well, some of them are absent because you got them in jail behind these drug wars and all this other stuff.
Absolutely. And nobody questions that, oh, you broke the law. So that's what, in the war on drugs, they always say in the end when you have the best argument right there in front of their face, they always say it's as long as it didn't change the law, because the real thing they're putting you in jail for, according to their perspective, is for breaking the law. Is for
but the laws are set up in a way
if
to
we
target
say not
people.
Jumping over that crack is against the law, then you don't jump over that crack. The society depends on it.
Yeah. And I'm going to get into all of that Saturday at 4 o'clock at Riverside Church. People should come out and get into it. But I'm not only going to talk about what the problem is, I'm going to talk about what we need to do about it. Because we're up against a situation where people have already been stigmatized. The isolation is going on. People are being warehoused in prison in discriminatory ways. And see, those three things are part of the international definition of genocide.
Sure.
We don't have the mass
That's interesting.
executions yet.
Okay.
Although Brother Graham did get executed, and that's how we got to look at that. Those cops, were judge, jury, and executioner
and there wasn't
in
another
that case.
within a few days of that where I saw in the video again on YouTube.
Jatiq Reed,
where he was
the guy who was brutally beaten down
on the street.
I mean, for nothing. Cops just stepped to him and began to beat this brother. Luckily, somebody got it on videotape.
It's not just about Guantanamo.
Because if that hadn't happened, because they do this all the time.
Yeah.
This time, though, they got caught in the act, and the video is there, so that's important. But I'm not only going to talk about the problems, I'm going to talk about what we need to do, and there's two levels to this. First, let me just say, we need a revolution. We need to get rid of a system that has these cops as frontline enforcers for the brutality, misery, and degradation that life today is for large numbers of people and growing numbers of people, with the economic meltdown and what that's meant for people who thought they had it made, thought they had their piece of the American dream. We need to get rid of that system through revolution, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about what kind of revolution, what kind of world it could bring into being. I'm going to talk about the leadership we have for that revolution, and Bob Avakian, the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party. But then I'm also going to say, what do we need to do right now? You know, because you can't make revolution whenever you want, and you especially can't make it with people and conditions the way they are now. But conditions can change, and so can people.
What do you think of this Occupy Wall Street thing?
Oh, Occupy Wall Street was a very important development because
it still is, not was.
Yes.
I think it is.
Well, you're right, it is. And in fact, later on this month, there's going to be a mass protest from the perspective of opposing the suppression of Occupy, the Occupy movement, because there's a nationwide attempt
story about Oakland here. Can we
to
look at
strangle
the picture?
it.
Can you open? I'm sure you have some beautiful pictures.
Yeah.
There. We don't have a real lot of time, but folks can see these are folks out there protesting, and maybe inside. I haven't looked inside this edition, but if you have any pictures of what was going on in Oakland for folks to look at.
Yeah, we
You're
do.
a very colorful newspaper, and I give it high recommendation as an interesting paper to read. Here we go, and here are some photographs of Oakland, and maybe folks can see a little bit about what happened there. And there was an assault on protesters, and that's been sort of an ongoing thing that's been happening in Oakland since the beginning in November.
And see, the point about the Occupy movement is that people were really getting hit from every end, but also they were paralyzed. And part of the paralysis was, frankly, Obama, because people thought that, I even had people tell me, we've made our revolution, we put Obama in office, you know, because they were that excited. And I'm not just talking about black people, I'm talking about a lot of young white people who were like, you know, I never thought I would see this happen. And they were very proud of the fact that they had broken the color line in the White House. But then you got to say, what did that come down to? And was that going to lead to the kind of changes that they were certain Obama was going to end the wars, stop the government spying, stop attacking people's rights, stop the government from messing over black people.
What's going to be your take on the, and I know we're getting to the last couple of minutes, so I don't want to go off too much, but what's going to be your take on the upcoming election and the conventions during the summer?
Well, our take is going to be that people are going to be called on again to get behind Obama, and they're going to say, look, okay, Obama disappointed you. He didn't end the wars. He didn't stop government spying. In fact, he went even farther with some of that stuff.
And arresting leakers, you know,
yes, arresting
helping
leakers.
Reporters find out the truth about what's
He
going on. He
actually codified some things that Bush wouldn't even codify. This thing of we can assassinate U.S. citizens anywhere around the world on executive decision. But the other guy is worse. And whoever it ends up to be,
it's an old story in American
the other
politics.
guy is going to be horrible, but the point is they're both worse because they both represent the same system and what it needs, and which one ends up presiding over it is going to be based upon a determination of what's in the interest of the empire. And the interests of the empire are directly counter to our interests. So that's how we're going to go at it. And I will point out all of the racist, reactionary stuff that the Republicans do.
And where's this going to be? Tell folks where they can go, and give them a website too to look.
Okay,
find out more information.
I will point all that out, but I'll also point out to them how getting behind Obama is going to paralyze them and demobilize them for dealing with the attacks that come from the system that both of them will represent, the Republican and the Democrat.
Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
See, and we're going to get into some of this in relation to this mass incarceration, because when I talk about revolution as the solution and the need to resist,
Sure.
people have to not get caught up in, well, I got to get lined up at the ballot box. That's the main thing, because if you're lined up at the ballot box, you are not building resistance to the attacks that are coming down. So I'm going to get into all of this. Again, it's going to be Saturday. It's going to be 4 o'clock at the Riverside Church. That's Claremont Avenue between West 120th and West 122nd Street in Greater Harlem. I just call it Harlem,
Sure.
but I'll say Greater Harlem for people who want to say, well, Morningside Heights, Hamilton Heights, and all like that. You can get there by train. Take the number 1 train to 116th Street if you're coming from downtown, to 125th Street if you're coming from uptown. Get out and take a little walk. Weather will probably be
Can't miss it. It's
not
got
so
a big steeple
not
there.
so bad. So
Yeah.
get out, get a little air. My theme is going to be mass incarceration plus silence equals genocide. And the point to the silence, haven't talked about that yet, is that we cannot be silent in the face of attacks like this. We have to take them on. We have to build resistance. We call it fighting the power and transforming the people for revolution.
Sure. Okay, do you have a website, or is there a website
Yeah.
people can go to?
For a website, people can go to www.revcom.us. That's REVCOM.us. They can also call, if you want to go old school and low tech,
Sure.
you can call area code 212-691-3345. That's the phone number for Revolution Books, which is sponsoring
Great.
my talk. And I should note that the Social Justice Committee of the Riverside Church is hosting the talk.
Right.
So I should...
We have a minute to go. I just wanted to touch on, you did a speaking tour with Cornell West. Very interesting. Tell us a
we've
little-
been
what was that about?
dialoguing in the age of Obama, what future for our youth. We did 2 at City College. We did UC Berkeley and UCLA. We actually...
Folks can see that on YouTube, right? They could probably dial it
They
up on
could
YouTube? Or...
dial it up on YouTube. I'm sure there are at least excerpts there. There's probably the first one might be up in total. And we were planning on doing Atlanta University and the University of Chicago. We just got word, though, that Morehouse University, the powers that be there, said they don't want me and Cornell coming down there talking about Obama. So
We're
that's
going
going
to
to be...
save that for the next show.
Next show.
That's a great show, okay? Thanks a lot, Carl Dix, for joining us on Let Them Talk, and we'll see you
Thank you,
next
Paul.
week. Thank you very much, Carl. Take care.